Hello, welcome in. Today I just want to do a quick wrap up of what I read in November. How was your November? Did you do anything fun? Did you read anything fun? For me, I didn't get to read a lot in November, but what I did read, I enjoyed most of it. So it was a pretty good month for me. I started off with several ghost stories that were kind of left over from my October TBR. The first one I read was episode 13. This is about a TV show crew, like a ghost hunters thing, that go do paranormal investigations and kind of try to either prove the haunting or debunk the haunting. So there's a husband and a wife, and the husband very much believes in ghosts and the wife is a scientist. And the plot kind of plays on that difference and tension between them. They end up going to investigate this one house that is particularly notorious. And when they get there, some things start happening that even the wife can't really explain away. And it goes downhill very quickly and things get really wild. The format of this book is really interesting. It's basically a found footage documentary, like an epistolary format. Transcripts from footage that was found, journal entries from the characters as they're exploring the house, letters between, the producers and the characters. I love epistolary format in novels, and I also love found footage in film, so I really liked how it was done. I will say that the story and the plot started off really strong for me. The first half was so good, and then the second half, I kind of just didn't like it as much. I saw a Goodreads review saying that the first half was very much like supernatural and horror genre, and then the second half leaned more into like science fiction, and that is what it felt like to me, and I didn't enjoy the second half as much. But overall, I still enjoyed it. And then the next book I read, actually kind of a similar plot, and that was Delicious Monsters. This is a young adult horror haunted house story, and it follows two storylines. The first one is about a teenage girl named Daisy who lives in the city with her single mother, and Daisy is really struggling because she can see dead people, and this ability really takes its toll on her life. And then her mom inherits an old mansion from her uncle that's in the countryside in Canada where she grew up, and they decide to move there, turn it into an Airbnb, and just start a new, better, more peaceful life. But of course, when they get there, the mansion turns out to be kind of a sinister place and causes a lot more problems. And then the other storyline is 10 years later, we're following a young woman named Brittany who has a ghost hunting YouTube show. Brittany decides that she can go there and kind of investigate some of the stuff that's in that mansion's past. And in both of these storylines, there are a lot of elements of family secrets that people keep, especially within families. And also the idea of control is really big in this book, which I thought was really interesting, and I really, really liked this. After that, I read another kind of haunted house book called Ghost Eaters, but this was really weird compared to the other two. It's about a young woman named Erin who is mourning the death of her kind of on-again, off-again boyfriend who she had a very kind of tumultuous relationship with. He was a drug addict, and he was also quite manipulative and abusive in their relationship and their friendship. And even though they're broken up now, Erin is still really hurt by his death. And one of their mutual friends tells Erin that before he died, he and Silas had been experimenting with this drug that lets you see and talk to ghosts. And he convinces Erin to try it, of course, because she's like, I want to talk to Silas again. Of course, things spiral out of control. It gets really weird. It took a lot of turns that I simply was not expecting. And as much as I really wanted it to be the type of weird that I really liked, I think was the type of weird that just made me feel weird in the end. Again, I was reading other people's Goodreads reviews, and there was one that I think really explained how I felt too, and that was that there were several different kind of storylines with different themes that individually could have been really good, but with all of them together, they each felt kind of incomplete and unfulfilled, and like they didn't connect to each other well enough. For example, some of the things that I really liked about this book were the way that it started to explore an abusive relationship and kind of the dependence on that connection and that love that she feels that she can't escape even after he's dead, and the exploration of addiction, which I think pairs really well with the relationship, the exploration of grief, and of course the ghost story itself. She sees ghosts that have to do with the era of slavery in the region, the era of having no labor and worker protections, people who died in factory fires. There's a lot of homeless people or people struggling with addiction, stuff like that. And I kind of felt like, why were we bringing that stuff up so often? To not actually go into any of it, and that's kind of what I didn't like. It just felt like there was no focus. And like I said, it just got really weird. So in the end, I don't really know how I feel about it. Like, it was interesting and I did have a pretty good time reading it, but that was basically the end of my ghost story era for the month. After that, I started reading God Killer, which I was so excited about, and it ended up being really good. I loved it. This is a fantasy story. There are gods, many gods of many different things, and some of them have lots of followers and get lots of offerings, so they're very powerful, and it actually becomes a problem. So eventually the king outlaws worship of any gods, and we follow 4 main characters. The first main character is a young woman named Kissin, who when she was a child, her family was offered up as human sacrifices to a god of fire. And she escaped and survived. And of course, now she hates the gods and has dedicated her life to hunting and killing them. And then the second main character is a little girl named Anara, who woke up one day with a new god, a little baby god, like a little woodland creature who can shapeshift. His name is Skedi, and he is the god of white lies. We also get some chapters from his point of view, and he is for some reason bound and connected to this little girl, and they don't know why, so they are out seeking help and how to fix this problem. And then the last main character that we follow is a man named Eligast, who used to be a knight and a friend of the king, but after the war he settled down to just be a quiet, cozy baker. But recently the king has asked him for another favor, so he is on the road out doing something for the king, and they all end up running into each other and kind of forming a group. Like I said, I really loved this book, and one of the things that I loved was that group dynamic, because each of them have very different goals and beliefs, but somehow they're managing to work together. But sometimes there's a lot of tension because they want very different things. I also just loved them each individually as characters. And then I also loved the way that this book described the gods. I loved that basically every god starts off as this tiny little baby thing, and if they manage to get more followers or more people worshiping them or more offerings and stuff, then they gain more power. And we encounter some gods like Skedi, who are just little babies, or there's this one god in the city that they find that is just a tiny little mouse, and he's the god of broken sandals. Obviously he has no followers, so he's just this little baby, like just collecting crumbs. But then there are also gods that are like big, scary, evil Godzilla monsters. And as they get more powerful, they also just get nastier and more evil in their hunt for more and more power. And I really like the way that this book kind of portrayed that concept of power as something that is very corrupting and very harmful. And yeah, I really love this book, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel. Then the last thing that I read in November was Book of Night by Holly Black, which I loved so much. I actually went into this completely blind. I had no idea what it was going to be about. I just knew that it was written by Holly Black, and that was enough for me. I trust this woman with my life. And of course, she did not let me down once again. Basically, this is set in like an urban fantasy setting where recently we have discovered that our shadows can be somewhat magically manipulated and controlled, or they can kind of gain a small sense of consciousness and be used to do things. So there's a lot of really interesting like shadow magic going on, and the implications of that are really interesting. And then the main character that we follow is a young woman named Charlie, who is a con artist. This plot had me so completely hooked, and the characters are so lovable. As usual, Holly Black I think is really good at making characters that I just really want to root for, even though they're often very flawed. And this book was the same. I love Charlie so much. I want her and her sister to succeed so badly. And also the romance in this book was really good and heart-wrenching, and it ended in such a way that I need the sequel immediately. Like, I really cannot wait for this next book. I know she said that it's going to be a duology, but there's no news about when it's coming out, and I'm heartbroken because I need it today. So that is everything that I read in November. Like I said, it was a really good reading month. I had a great time. Let me know how your November was, what you've been up to, what you've been reading. I would love to hear from you. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that I get to talk to you soon. Bye!